And Richard Sauder is my guest. He was the first person to popularize the mysterious topic of underground and then underwater bases and tunnels by developing or delving into the open literature of the government, the military, and industrial paper trail. He is the author of several books, including Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. His most recent work on the secret world of underground bases and tunnels, Underwater and Underground Bases in 2001, which expands the scope of his earlier work to include military plans for manned bases and tunnels beneath the seafloor. Richard Sauder is a native Virginian with an abiding interest in Fortina. Unusual information and anomalous paradigm-busting data of all varieties. Beginning in early childhood, he has experienced first-hand contact with a variety of paranormal phenomena that have left him a bit puzzled and thoroughly persuaded that there is much more to the earth and to human perception and consciousness than the mainstream American culture believes. And some of Richard's favorite research and reading interests are underground and underwater bases and tunnels, electronic mind control, freedom technology, UFOs, human prehistory and remote antiquity, international politics, and Kundalini energy and alternative thought patterns. So we are going to have a fantastic conversation tonight with Richard Sauder, and I'm going to bring him on because he is patiently waiting. So everybody, please welcome Richard to Late Night in the Midlands. Good evening, Richard. Welcome to Late Night in the Midlands. It is a pleasure to have you tonight.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm happy to be with you.
Well, great. And I have been looking forward to having a conversation with you tonight. And I guess let's start with a little background. And what got you so interested in this whole topic? I mean, I've been telling people for a long time there's practically cities below ground, and they think that I'm crazy for saying that. And by the way, you're breathing in the phone a little, so if you can I don't know, pull it away just a little bit, that'd be great. Thank you. Sure. So yeah, give us some background, Richard.
Well, in the late 1980s, when I was pursuing my graduate education, living out in the Southwest, for the first time, Southwest of North America in the United States, for the first time, I began to hear stories that were current in that area of the country about alleged secret underground tunnels and bases. That was new to me. It was very interesting to me. I had no idea if the stories were true, and if so, how true they were. When I got a little free time in my schedule, I determined to look into that a little bit, and actually did some archival research and went straight to industrial, governmental, military documentation on the public record. And didn't take long to discover that indeed there were and are a fair number of underground bases, some of which are publicly known and impressively large. I would say, right off the top of my head, facilities like Site R, the Raven Rock facility on the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania on the east coast of the United States is one. It's called the Alternate Pentagon. Another one would be Mount Weather in Northern Virginia, about an hour's drive outside of Washington, D.C. Another one that many people will know of, having seen it in movies over the years, is the Cheyenne Mountain complex operated by NORAD in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. And there are others, but those three suffice to prove the general rule. So I wrote up what I could in a little article for UFO magazine, published at that time out of Los Angeles by Don Ecker and Vicky Cooper. They ran the article in early November of 1992. And at that point, I felt like, having said in the article that, yes, there certainly are underground bases, and some of them can be impressively large and deep and technologically sophisticated, just judging from information on the public record. But as regards alleged ETs or aliens in these facilities, I can say nothing because I have no documented proof of their being in those facilities. And I said that in the article and felt at that point that I had exhausted the topic. Well, several weeks later, the week between Christmas and New Year's of 1992, I was awakened in the wee hours of the morning from a sound sleep by a voice speaking very quietly and consciously in my inner ear. I was alone in my very small student ghetto apartment, and no one was there but me and my cat. And the voice said very quietly to me, "The underground bases are real," and went on then for just 2 or 3 minutes to describe a vast project of subterranean construction with huge bases and technologically involved programs and projects with lots of bureaucratic involvement by agencies and engineering corporations and great secrecy, lots of money. I got the impression of, wow, this is huge, and yet no one knows. Well, he went on like that for just a couple of minutes, as I say, and then ceased talking as abruptly as he had begun. The voice was that of an adult male, Caucasian, speaking normally accented, educated, late 20th century North American English. I, from the very first, never perceived that the voice was that of an angel or a demon, of God, or that I was losing my mind, or that there was some kind of ET transmission to my brain. I always felt, and there's some hard documentation for that, that I was the recipient of an electronic transmission to my auditory cortex. In fact, in a subsequent book of mine, which is now out of print, entitled Kundalini Tales, out of print means I don't receive any royalties from it anymore. But in that book, Kundalini Tales, I included in the extensive appendix a United States patent for a so-called brain transmitter, which uses pulsed microwave transmissions to beam directly to the auditory cortex intelligible sound, i.e. voice transmission. So this technology has been out there for decades now, perhaps all the way back to the World War II period. It's very well advanced. People have to understand this electronic mind control technology is virtually science fiction-like, and it is very real. It's not magical. It's nuts and bolts electronics. Now, I listened to what this man said to me and determined I could do nothing about it right then, so I went back to sleep. However, the next morning I certainly remembered what I had been told in the night and determined that if it were true, given the scope of what he described to me, there should be a paper trail, that some paper would have to fall through the cracks. Not everything could be hidden. So I went out and I began an exhaustive search for that paper trail, which ultimately resulted in 3 little books on the secret underground bases and tunnels, and even the plans for undersea bases and tunnels. I did that. I kept at that for a period of years and found out far more information that I would have suspected at the outset, and I can now say with complete confidence, indeed the bases do exist. They're real. They can be very big and very deep and very technologically sophisticated. And my research strongly points to that technology and that program extending out undersea as well, and for the better part of a half a century and even more.
Now I've had guests on like Robert Stanley has come on and he's talked about the Malibu bases. So, and this would be underwater bases. So these do exist. These are real. I mean, they're not all. I mean, are any of them alien? I mean, a lot of people say they're ET bases, but these you're talking about human bases, or are they sharing these things?
Well, I think they're both. I think they're actually both. And while we're talking about this alleged Malibu base, I've looked at the evidence that has been put forth to allegedly document that, and I have to say that with respect specifically to the alleged Malibu base, I am skeptical, extremely skeptical. That said, the technology to make undersea bases has been around since the mid-1960s at the least. And given the paper trail that I've uncovered and what I've been informally told by a number of people, including people connected with the United States Navy, people who were in the uniformed United States Navy, in the ranks, that for me, it's a certainty that these bases exist. Now, I'm an outsider. I've never been able to go in, and that's an advantage, actually. Because if you are in a compartmentalized project, whether it's the espionage service agencies, the secret services, or the military agencies, or even in these corporate programs, which are frequently extremely compartmentalized, you cannot talk about what you know. And more than that, you only know what you know, meaning that if you're in a compartmentalized program, you know what's in the compartment or a compartmentalized fraction of what's in that compartment and no more, because you are sealed off from other compartments. Now, the advantage that someone like me has is that I've never worked for any of these agencies, never been in the military. I don't have even one clearance, so that I am not constrained by that compartmentalized structure as so many. The evidence suggests that millions of people are in these structures. It's virtually what we're dealing with here is both in the case of the ETs, and I have no doubt that they're here. I've seen a few of them myself over the years, and other people have, many other people have. People have been, for whatever reason, gone into some of these bases, have been taken into them. I've spoken with some of these individuals personally. I'm persuaded of the sincerity and of the factual nature of their accounts, or at least part of their accounts. And what it gets down to is that we have one or more parallel societies on this planet. Michael, that's a big thought, and it took me a big chunk of my life to realize what was going on.
That is huge, and I'm not going to interrupt you. I want you to go ahead and explain it, and as I have questions, I'll just butt in, but you obviously have done more research on this than I, so please.
The way it works is that there's a social technology of compartmentalizing social reality. I have spent my life in what passes for the open global human culture, where I live in South America now, where I walk down the street in a large city, whether it's Quito or Guayaquil or Lima or wherever, and I'm passing hundreds of people on the sidewalk, even thousands. I'll get on a bus or I'll take a trolley, etc. And I'll go to a store, I'll go to the market, whatever. And I'm in the open society that passes for consensual social reality on planet Earth in the first part of the 21st century. And most people assume that's all there is. And in fact, no, that's one part of all there is, from the standpoint only of human social structures on this planet. Let me elaborate.
Please do.
Whether we are talking about the so-called initiatic societies like the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, the Scottish Rite Freemasons, etc., or intelligence or agencies, espionage agencies, secret services like the NSA, the CIA, Army intelligence, naval intelligence, etc., or a very highly compartmentalized corporate structure as Microsoft might have, or Lockheed Martin, or any of the other major Fortune 500 companies, especially those that have major R&D contracts with agencies of the United States government, or you're talking about major high finance operations on Wall Street in the city of London, or you're talking about some types of religious organizations, such as, let's say, for example, the Jesuits in the Catholic Church, or the Scientologists, to use just two well-known prominent examples.
You know,
in all of these cases, when you get into the structure of these organizations at any serious level, you begin from the very start to be subject to security oaths, and not only information compartmentalization, but who you associate with and how you associate with them, and what you may and may not say to them, and under what circumstances. And not only that, we have to add in the criminal syndicates here as well, the Yakuza, the Chinese triads, the Sicilian mafia, the Corsican mob, etc., the Mexican mobs. They all also have their compartmentalization and their modus operandi of omerta, of silence. You can and cannot say certain things to certain people. You can and cannot do certain things. Listen to me well, Michael. On pain of death. And so you have all of these substructures of global society, which I've just described, that are also operating cheek by jowl, side by side, in some cases, as my research has revealed, physically beneath the global so-called open human society. And all of this is walled off, very secretive, very controlled, very hush-hush. And within these compartmentalized projects, which are ruled by very serious oaths, that in many of these organizations, you violate the oath, and not only are you out of the organization, they may just take you out physically. And the criminal syndicates are some of the best examples, but not only them. A former Air Force intelligence operative that I knew when I lived in Texas told me one time that the CIA had tried to recruit him, and he turned them down because, as he explained to me, Richard, the CIA even kills their own. That's the ultimate compartmentalization. Now, all of these, in all of the cases, whether we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church, the Scientologists, these criminal syndicates, the CIA, the NSA, these major Fortune 500 companies, the big Wall Street trading firms, and the big banking houses in the City of London, all of them are massively, massively funded and have access to quantities of money that the average person cannot even begin to comprehend. Not just millions or tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, but billions of dollars or even trillions they can leverage. It's another reality that has almost nothing in common with the everyday reality that the average person spends most or all of their life in. Now, not only vast sums of money, but along with vast sums of money comes almost unfettered access to virtually any expert in any field, scientist, engineer, technician, etc. And also with vast sums of money, you can either develop or refine or buy almost any technology that you desire. And by this means, what has happened over time, and it's taken centuries, maybe even thousands of years, there's a long trajectory behind this, long historical trajectory and institutional and bureaucratic build up to where we are now. But over time, you have this huge, secretive, parallel structure that's out there. It exists. It's massively funded. There are millions of people involved in it to one degree or the other. And it is access to cutting-edge, high technology that greatly exceeds the technology available to the everyday person in the so-called ordinary world. So against that background, you have to understand that when you're dealing with this reality of the underground bases and tunnels, which was, I stumbled across. I'm like the guy walking down the street that picks the wrong moment to look over his shoulder behind him and doesn't notice the open manhole cover right in front of him and plunges down, 10 feet underground to say, what the hey? There's a whole realm down here beneath the street. There's wires, there's cables, conduits. Hey, there's some guys with hard hats down there 100 yards away doing something. And what I'm telling you is there is an entire hidden, not completely hidden, because you can't completely hide it because it's so big and so involved, but it's substantially hidden. And it's big, it's massive, it's well-funded, it's technologically sophisticated, it's got a long history behind it, and there are millions of people involved in it to one degree or another who say almost nothing. That's a vast, multi-layered physically and multi-layered socially, social reality and technological reality that exists side by side with the so-called ordinary world. Now, it's got a terrestrial human side, and it's got another side which appears to be non-human and or non-terrestrial. Now it gets a little more confusing. It appears that some of the non-terrestrials, i.e. extraterrestrials, are also human, so much so that they resemble us quite strongly and can pass in our society, which implies that there are multiple Earth-like planets in the galaxy, that this is not the only planet with a human population on it. In fact, some people will maintain that the human species of life is quite common in the galaxy and that there are literally thousands of planets in this galaxy with humans on them. It appears humans are a spacefaring species and have been for a long time. Indeed, we may not have originated on this planet, Michael. I can't tell you that we did or that we didn't. I'm only saying that at the age of 60, I have come to have a whole lot of questions that never even occurred to me when I was 20 years old.
Well, Richard, I believe that we did originate off this planet. I've always felt that way, that we're not originally from here. And now which was funny is when we were talking off air, doing a little test on the line, you had mentioned how that sometimes they got the technology, obviously, to knock out certain words when you're talking about things you're not supposed to. And when you were getting into the whole Vatican and Jesuit thing, just certain words would, but you could understand what you were saying. But they tried to, just like you said, they try to knock those certain words. Can actually hear something going, ooh, and then it tries to knock out a word on you. So that was funny.
What people have to understand is, well, I'm not saying you have to understand it, but if you do understand it, certain aspects of what we are contending with as a species and a planet right now may just become a little clearer.
So
we probably are dealing at this point with an internet that is awake and aware, i.e., we are probably dealing with some degree of artificial intelligence. Now, with the internet, you would think, for example, a human being has certain sensory inputs. We've got 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, 2 ears, etc. Now, in the case of the internet, let's just postulate as a hypothesis that the internet is awake. Number one, if that's so, it's not limited to the degree that an individual human being is. I'm sitting in a room in Quito, Ecuador. But if the internet is awake, it doesn't just have 10 fingers and 2 eyes and 2 ears and a tongue and a nose. It has hundreds of millions or billions of sense organs. And it's getting input from my laptop computer right now, from whatever rig you have set up where you are, from all of those who are listening to this broadcast, this conversation. It's getting input from, let's say there's an astronomy department at the University of Texas, and that it has some kind of mainframe computer set up there. It's getting input from there. It's getting input from travel agencies, from newsrooms, from television stations, radio stations, from meteorological stations, you name it, on and on. It's just getting a flood of data from hundreds of millions or billions of different sensory inputs all over this planet. And Michael, it is reading us up, down, and sideways. So it's reading all of the tweets and emails. And what it's doing is, if it is awakened at this point, it may be more or less still in an infantile or juvenile stage. What do little children do? Little babies in their crib, they suddenly notice, hey, there's a foot there, and it's got 5 toes, and they'll grab their foot and try to put it in their mouth, etc. Now, what happens if you have, billions or hundreds of millions and billions of sensory inputs? What would you do as you wake up? And I suspect this is why people like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and other scientific and technological and industrial experts are now starting to warn about the dangers of AI, nascent AI, awakening AI, and of the increasing robotization of not just of industry, but of more and more aspects of human life and interaction on this planet. What are the implications of that? Well, let me game it out for you. Okay. Let's say a lot of people have a pet. They may have a cat or a puppy or something. Let's say they've got an old cat that is in a foul mood and he's taken to spraying the furniture, right? And so they decide, and scratching the furniture with his claws. So they decide to get rid of the cat. Cat's causing problems, so they get rid of the cat. Or people may get a young puppy, and it's cute for a little while, but it pees on the carpet. It chews up the sofa, so they decide to get rid of it. Well, that's the analogy. What if, as AI awakens, it decides that it needs to get rid of these 7 billion two-legged rats that are chewing everything up, just causing problems for it? What if, you see? And you would only know that when you know that.
That's right. And, there's been a lot of talk about these main computers that they want to use, and what these would do is be like intelligent bases that would feed off all the other computers around the world and just keep feeding information into it. And eventually, the computer would know everything there is to know about us. It would literally become Big Brother.
And maybe that has already happened. I don't know that it has, but the mere fact that some of these leading lights in industry and academic world are beginning to raise, publicly to raise the alarm, makes me wonder if we're not dangerously farther down that path than we suspect. For example, in my second book, I recount an anecdote that was related to me by Bill Hamilton. I know Bill have known Bill for years. Bill, in his professional life, was a very high-level computer programmer and programmed for a variety of agencies, large institutions. And one of the jobs he had, he worked with an ex-military programmer who also programmed at a very high and secure level. According to Bill, part of this ex-military programmer's job involved working underground at White Sands Military Base, where he would descend below the surface to catch a high-speed tube shuttle train that would then take him to an underground facility where he was tasked, along with other military computer programmers, to work with and interact with a vastly intelligent, self-aware, wide-awake, artificially intelligent supercomputer named Irene. That was, some years ago, back in, I believe, in the late 20th century when that happened. I suspect the story is likely true, at least in its bare elements, and that not only Irene, but much more exists, and that in a good many of these underground installations we are faced with technology about which we know nothing, technology that is science fiction-like, and that not only do we know nothing about, but we don't understand. We don't know what motives these artificial life forms may have. We don't know if they are in league with someone or something else. We don't know where the technology has come from, truly. We don't know. We don't know. And that bothers me. The high degree of secrecy and extreme degree of compartmentalization from the mainstream society means that, by definition, a great deal is being hidden from us. Almost everything is being hidden from us, Michael, which implies that if we knew about it, we might not like it, and so therefore we are not told about it. That, following that line of reasoning, suggests that what is being done is not being done for us, but to us.
Absolutely. Now, I want to talk a little bit about these underground facilities. It's true that they have these things. Let's talk just the United States for starters, and then we'll go world. But the entire United States has tunnels beneath it, and even cities and farms, and I mean, so basically what you're saying, and I have no doubt in anything you're telling me right now, but what you're telling me is that there is a whole nother reality, a whole nother world within our world right now. There's people down there now. They're going...
unknown numbers, Michael, and we don't know what they're doing. I'll give you one brief example. I talked with one expert who worked at a very high, very secure level in this world. In fact, I've talked with more than one. I've talked with a good number of them. But this one, I put that question to and asked how many people are living and working underground. Just a ballpark figure. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 30 million, just give me an idea. This guy looked at me and he said, I don't know.
Well,
in other words, when you have this compartmentalization that's so extreme, so highly funded, so high-tech, so multi-agency, so spread out all over the place and all under the place, and when it's so compartmentalized and it goes on for so many years, decades at least, half a century or more, then the only answer that you can possibly give is, I don't know. I had a follow-up question, which was, in our society, not only in the United States, but in other countries, there's been a troubling issue for years, and that is disappeared people.
Yeah.
Not only children, but all kinds of people that disappear. I've seen it here in Ecuador, where you'll see flyers up in storefronts or in front of buildings saying, we haven't seen such and such a family member for 10 days. Last seen at such and such a market or such and such a bus station. Please help us contact him or her. They can be teenagers or even middle-aged people. Just vanish. And this has been ongoing for a long time. So I asked him, there's a lot of people that disappear, and I'm wondering if some of them are taken away as slaves to these secret facilities, or as prisoners, or as research subjects in genetic engineering experiments or something like that. And the answer I got was, I don't know, but if they are, they would never be permitted to leave alive. Because if you were kidnapped, that's a capital crime. And if you were taken away to a secret facility and you were tortured or genetically engineered or worked as a slave, those are crimes for which guilty people routinely serve decades in prison or even their whole life. And so if you're on the inside of some of those projects and you've taken the security oath and you're all in, it's your life, and you begin to do those things, Michael, you cannot confess, because if you confess, you're either dead or you're in prison for the rest of your natural life.
And that is a great point you just brought up. Over and over on this show, guests will come on, we'll talk about the missing people, and they'll often say, well, they were probably taken off planet. Never until now does somebody say, well, perhaps they're below ground. That makes a lot of sense. Below ground
or below sea. Yeah. I don't rule that out at whatsoever. Michael, we're dealing with something so big, so strange, so massive, and I want to impress upon people the massive multi-trillion-dollar funding behind this. The amount of money is just over the moon, and the technology and the institutional support that's involved. Now, I wouldn't rule out that people could be taken off planet or chopped up,
Oh yeah.
Body chop shops. Now, you have to understand that there's also an international traffic in human organs. So if you Shanghai a healthy 15-year-old, say, what are you going to get? Well, you're going to get eyeballs, kidneys, a liver, a heart, on and on, right?
Yeah.
Worth big money on the international black market. There are people who really pay for that. And you know what? Including well-known hospitals. The medical mafia is another one that's hugely implicated in this ghastliness that's going down on this planet. I wish it weren't like that, man.
I do too.
But it is. It's just the way it is, and it's beyond sad. It is ghastly.
You're right. It is. It's really sad, and there's a lot of mysteries we're trying to get the answers to, and I really enjoy talking about this underground phenomena because I got other questions here. How about all the people have heard noises? We've heard for the last few years now, maybe longer. People are hearing rumbling, and I've heard it here in Columbia, South Carolina, a rumbling where you'll feel a vibration, and it'll sound like a tractor trailer is going over speed bumps at 60 in front of your house, but there's nothing there. I mean...
Yes. Well, in the case of Columbia, South Carolina, of course, that region of southeastern region of North America is a known seismically active earthquake zone, and you do have a fair number of earthquakes there. A lot of people think that, the coastal south of North America is not a place where you have earthquakes, but yes, you can, and they can be quite severe in some cases. Beyond that, it's not only South Carolina where these noises have been heard. There have been a great number of these sorts of noises heard all over North America and in other places as well. In my view, Some of this could plausibly be explained by subterranean excavation activity. Some of it could also be explained, in my view, by overlapping dimensions of reality. This is another hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, and I know some people listening to the show may be aware of my activities in recent years, in which I have began to explore some aspects of South American shamanism, indigenous shamanism. I am not a shaman, but I have learned something about it and participated to some degree in some aspects of South American shamanism. And what I can tell you is that as you do that, one of the things you learn, that I've certainly learned, is that we are spiritual beings, but not just us. We are surrounded by a spiritual reality. We are immersed in a spiritual reality. We are spirits in physical bodies, but our essential reality is spiritual. That's our primary reality. And not only that, but one thing you rapidly learn is that there are other dimensions of reality that you can perceive, and the plants help you to do that. The plants are awake. That's one thing that our Western society has gotten away from. You know, the Catholic Church killed witches during the Middle Ages. Witches were herbalists. They were the women who worked with medicinal plants, including mushrooms, by the way, and other plants, some of which were shamanic, visionary plants. But they were killed in large numbers by the Catholic Church. Why? The Christian Church does not want you to understand that plants have spirits, just as we do.
I believe that.
They are living organisms. Well, I can tell you that in my visionary experiences, I have directly seen the spirits of a number of plants in Amazon. They are awake and aware. That's all I can tell you. They do move, but slowly.
Well, you're right. They do, and you know, I talk with my plants. I have lots of love for my plants, and so. But go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt, but I just
they are. What I'm saying is that there are multiple dimensions of reality. For all I know, there are an infinite number of reality dimensions. I rather suspect there are, and we are taught to assume implicitly by our culture that this reality that we are immersed in, the so-called open, everyday, street-level social reality, is all that there is, that it's the be-all and end-all of everything. What you see is what there is, and if you don't see it discussed on the radio, TV, in the newspapers, in the movies, etc., it doesn't exist. I'm here to tell you it's just not so. Reality is multifaceted, it's complex, it's richly layered, it's textured, it's nuanced, and from what I have seen, it is without beginning or without end. And so I think part of what people are perceiving is that this reality all the time is bumping up against other realities and vice versa, other dimensions. It's always been that way, and it probably always will, simply because the cosmos is vast, it is complex beyond belief, and never-ending. So given all of that, it couldn't be otherwise. Another possibility is deep core changes within the Earth itself, which are ongoing. There is growing scientific evidence to suggest that some time ago, very powerful, very huge changes took place in the Earth's core, and they're ongoing. They may eventually result in some kind of shift or flip of the poles and or dramatic geophysical activity on the surface level of this planet. We will have to stay tuned and see. What we do know from examining the geological record is that there is clear evidence of geological upheaval on this planet in the past, and we absolutely know that the poles have not always been in the positions where they are now. So the poles do change. They've changed multiple times in the past. The continents have not always been where they are now. There are heavily eroded mountain ranges. There are very new, very young mountain ranges, and we see evidence for this all over the planet. So the only question is whether great geological upheaval will happen within the span of our lifetimes. I don't rule it out, Michael, because people are hearing these sounds, these booms, explosions, these roars, these rumbles, which can be very impressively powerful in many cases. A fourth consideration is tunneling undersea off the coast of the southeast United States, say roughly, well, even all up and down the East Coast. One of my sources mentioned to me that this underwater-based technology is very easily adaptable to the continental shelf of the east coast of North America, roughly ranging from the maritime provinces of Canada all the way down to Florida and wrapping around the Gulf Coast into the Gulf of Mexico, that you can very easily enter that environment by dropping a shaft. Indeed, this is in the documentation I discuss in two of my books, Underwater and Underground Bases, and also in Hidden in Plain Sight Beyond the X-Files. But what you do is, according to the documentation I got from the Navy itself, you can drop a shaft straight down a mile or 2 miles straight down. Let's say the shaft is 20 or 30 feet in diameter. And then you lower down that shaft a tunnel boring machine in its component parts, and also lower down mechanics, highly trained, skilled mechanics, to put the tunnel boring machine together and begin to tunnel out horizontally from the bottom of the deep shaft. You can then tunnel out undersea in the bedrock down beneath the ocean floor. So even though you may imagine, well, there's 1,000 feet of water, wouldn't the water get in a tunnel? No, not if the tunnel is well sealed and down in the bedrock beneath the seafloor. There wouldn't be any more flooding than if the tunnel were underground on dry land. And once having entered that environment, there's nothing to keep you from tunneling for 10 miles, 100 miles, 500 miles straight out into the ocean. And then in seamounts, well out to sea, you could construct a base. In that base, you could have huge locks that actual military submarines could enter. And I have documentation from this that I cite in the books. I'm describing a technology that was feasible in the mid-1960s, and here we are in 2015. People could advisedly readjust their thinking and their mental horizons drastically to realize that what's happening in this so-called black budget compartmentalized world vastly exceeds anything that you know in your everyday life.
Uh-huh. I see. So how do these tunnels not collapse? How do they, what type of technology might they have that keeps, because the ocean's pretty darn heavy.
Well, it's just ordinary tunneling technology. And when I say ordinary tunneling technology, understand that the state of the art in modern civil engineering is very technologically advanced. So when you're down in the bedrock beneath the seafloor, the pressure of the sea itself seals the rock and the seafloor closed, so that once you're down in the rock, you're not dealing with the forces of the ocean. That's the whole point of making the tunnel in the rock and not on the seafloor, but actually beneath the seafloor. You might be 500 feet, 1,000 feet beneath the seafloor. You're well down into the rock itself. So the structural integrity of the bedrock beneath the sea is what gives the tunnel its strength and and keeps it from collapsing. You only using the same technology that's well discussed and well understood by mining engineers and civil engineers who do subterranean excavation. There's an extensive literature with table after table after table of the strength of different types of rock and the angles that you need to use in making the tunnel diameters, and under what conditions you need to use steel bolts to stabilize the rock to keep it from spalling under pressure, from popping under pressure. All of this is very well understood technologically and discussed and experimentally proven over a period of more than a century now.
I see. Well, I got a lot of questions, and I'm loving this conversation because believe me, I'm not one who's going to heckle about this, because I know that this is true, this is real, and for people who don't believe it, hey, all I could say is good luck with everything. This stuff is going on. So hang on with us, Richard. We're going to take this break. I'm going to put you on hold for a moment, so it's going to get a little quiet until we come back. We're going to be about 4 or 5 minutes. So my guest tonight, great guest. I am intrigued. Richard Sauter, and we're going to get back to it here, talking about these underground bases, mind control, ETs even. We're getting into it all with Richard, and he's not crazy. No. He is my guest, and he's telling you the truth. So let's get back to it. Richard, we are back, and folks, the website, latenightinthemidlands.com, you can go over to the chat and listen page and tune in right now over there. If you're listening to this on Dark Matter, again, don't call in, recorded for you. My guest is linked up on the homepage. We've got two of his websites linked up there. One is a blog. Go check it out. It's linked up in the picture slider. Just click on his pictures, and it'll take you off into Cyberland and to his site. So, Richard, we're back, and so let me ask you this to get things kicking here. I want to ask why they're building these things, and I guess we can all speculate, but you can't go without noticing, although some people do. You can't go without noticing the pickup by what I call the New World Order, the pickup of how there's been more tunnel building. I mean, there's been more final preparations made. There's been distractions thrown at us left and right here on the upper level here. They've been preparing with seed banks, and they've been preparing with all this stuff. What is it for? What do they know that we don't? I don't think it's just for war.
Yes, there's not just one they, so to speak.
Right.
We're dealing with multiple factions. In some cases, they cooperate. In other cases, they work at cross purposes. But this is something that, to a certain extent, is operating internationally or globally. There are, from what I've seen in the open literature, there can be all kinds of reasons for making underground or undersea facilities. They can be mining facilities, whether open or clandestine. Mining facilities, uranium, gold, platinum, whatever you want to mine. They can be also command, control, and communication facilities for the military. Some of these facilities have weapons stored or deployed in them, whether nuclear weapons or other sorts of weapons. They can be scientific research facilities. In some cases, they are intended as document repositories, places to safely keep and safeguard archival materials for industry or government. Some of these facilities, some of them are religious. Two well-known examples would be the great caverns under the Vatican, multiple levels under the Vatican and Vatican City in the middle of Rome, or the Mormon Church, for example, has a pretty state-of-the-art underground facility in the Wasatch mountains where they have their computers and extensive global genealogical materials. So those are two examples from well-known religious institutions. You could have also what you might call bolt holes or survival types of facilities. Let me give you an example. For years in the White House, in the formal governmental structure of the United States, there has been an agency called the Military Office for most of the post-World War II period. This is an office, little-known office of the United States military that is heavily funded essentially through the black budget. It is available for use by the American president according to his secret discretion. In the 1950s, in the era of Ike Eisenhower, for example, the military office made a series of dozens of secret underground installations all across the country for the purpose of protecting the president in an emergency situation. That was done more than half a century ago by just that one minor, relatively unknown, publicly unknown office that interfaces between the Pentagon and the executive office of the president. To my knowledge, the military office still exists. It is still funded with unknown amounts of money in a black budget slush fund and is available for the secret use of the American president at his discretion. All he has to say is, I want this, that, and the other thing, and it happens secretly, more or less. One example of that is, in recent years, there's been a good deal of secret underground excavation and construction beneath official Washington, D.C., including beneath the White House itself, to the extent that these stories even appeared openly in the press, including in the Washington Post. When you're carrying out a big civil engineering operation right beneath the White House itself, you cannot completely disguise it. I might add that this goes back more than half a century. One of my first informants, or not really informant, but one of the first people who gave me information was a friend of mine, actually, and it was a great surprise to me. It also revealed to me how many people walking around have bits and pieces of this puzzle, but aren't actively involved in the underground projects themselves. I was talking with her about the facility that is known to be beneath the White House. It's been there for at least since the 1950s, if not before. It's much bigger now than it used to be, but even then it was substantial. Well, I was telling her about that, and she said, yeah, I know, Richard, I've been in the White House basement. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, it was part of my job. I had to make a delivery there. And in my mind, I was thinking maybe earlier in her life she had driven a Lance cracker truck, for example, and that she had needed to restock the vending machines down a couple of flights of stairs beneath the White House. But no, it wasn't that at all. I was way off base. She was from the Mid-Atlantic region, went to college in Washington, D.C., and when she graduated, took an entry-level position in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and essentially a secretarial position in the bureaucracy. What happened to her was highly irregular, and I keep running into stories like this, which impresses upon me the great strangeness of it all. What happened to her was, she was sitting at her desk one day, and two men she didn't know approached her desk, dressed in formal business attire, in suits and ties, and handed her some documents and told her that they would like her to accompany them to the White House. And she said, well, why? And they said, we're with the Secret Service, and showed her their identification. And she said, well, why? Why do you need me to do this? And they said, just that you need to come with us. So she thought, little old me, why? Nonetheless, she went with them. They crossed town walked up to the guard station at the White House gate. They told her to give the guard the papers that they had given to her, which she did. They then told her she was free to return to her work, which she did, with her head spinning. She thought it was all very peculiar. No one ever said anything to her. No one challenged her as to why she had left her desk, why she had left work, and she didn't know at all what to make of it. Well, after a while, she put it out of her mind as just one of those bizarre, strange things that sometimes take place, until sometime later, 2 other Secret Service agents approached her desk in the same manner and also handed her some documents and asked her to accompany them to the White House. Again, she was wondering why, and they simply told her, "We need you to do this." And so she came with them to the White House. This was in the Lyndon Johnson administration, after Jack Kennedy was assassinated. And she went with them to the White House. This time, they went to the guard station, opened the gate, and escorted her up the driveway to the White House and into the White House. And then into the wing of the White House where the public doesn't go. I don't think they give tours now, but they did in those days. And escorted her to an elevator door. Punched some buttons, the elevator opened. They escorted her into the elevator. The doors closed, and they went down, according to her recollection. This was circa 1964, 1965. They went down, as she recalls, 17 levels beneath the White House. The doors opened. They escorted her out of the elevator. She found herself in a corridor lined with ceramic tiles, with recessed fluorescent lighting in the ceiling. The corridor stretched to the vanishing point in the distance, underground. Opening off of the corridor were other corridors, passages, and doorways. They escorted her down the corridor to one of the doorways, opened the door, escorted her in, where there was yet another man sitting at a desk in an office in suit and tie. She was ordered to give that man the papers that they had given her. She did. They then escorted her back out of that office into the corridor, back down the corridor to the elevator, into the elevator, up again into the White House, and then out of the White House, down the White House driveway to the Secret Service guardhouse, where she was told that she was free to return to work. That was my friend's delivery to the White House basement as of 1964-65. That facility is now much greater. And of course, what happened to her encapsulates what happens to so many people. And I've talked to a number of them now who, for reasons they don't know, have been taken into a variety of underground installations and even undersea for reasons they don't understand, by people they don't know, as part of some obscure exercise that makes you wonder and ask just what the hell is going on this planet that we live on. Are you there, Michael?
Yep, I'm here. I'm sorry. My mic was, I had it muted, and I forgot to turn it back on. We have a call, and he's been sitting around for a few minutes, so I want to bring him on. We have Ira, and Ira has had you on his show before. Welcome aboard, Ira.
Hello, Richard. It is so wonderful to hear your voice again. I loved having you on my show a few weeks back on Open Eyes, and I wanted to call in tonight and see if you would be willing, because I found this to be really, really fascinating to think about and really interesting. I think that the listeners would really like it as well. If you could elaborate a little bit on the information that you come out with, sometimes talking about how in these underground bases and undersea bases, there are entire generations of people that are living down there that have never seen the light of day.
Well, Ira, I can't prove that, but that is the implication of some of the information I have seen. I'll give you one example. In the so-called rock site documentation from the United States Navy that came out of the China Lake Naval Weapons Station in 1966, where the R&D team at China Lake was tasked with developing plans for a very large, very deep, technologically sophisticated, permanently manned bases well out to sea, down on the seafloor. In that literature, I specifically saw mentioned both graphically in illustrations and also in the text of stationing families in these bases, men, women, and children. Why would you station families in secret bases, military bases, well out to sea? Only if they were intended to live there and you were establishing a parallel military society apart from the surface, shore-based human society. Now that was circa 1966. And I am presuming that may possibly have occurred or may have already been a fact as of that date. Now, I will say, speaking as an adult male, that I think most adult males would not countenance the idea of going away and living permanently in underground, undersea facilities and not having the company of females. We're just not wired that way, most adult males. Now, there is a small demographic of the adult male population that is not wired that way, but most of us are. We greatly enjoy female company, let's put it that way. And I suspect that as this network has been expanded and deepened and extended, that my guess is that there is a resident parallel human population in this secret underground, undersea base environment. And if you remember, if you've ever seen the Stanley Kubrick's film, Dr. Strangelove, towards the end of that film, as apocalypse is descending on the earth, Dr. Strangelove is waxing eloquent as to how when this nuclear hell develops, that they will go underground and create these underground facilities, and that regrettably, in order to ensure the perpetuation of the human race, that each man will have to be supplied with 10 desirable females. And that's not my idea, that was Stanley Kubrick's idea. But who am I to object? Listen, I believe that is probably going on. Can I prove it? No, because I am not on the inside of any of those compartmentalized projects. And I would even go further than that and say that my research, in the literature I ran across, and while researching for my first book, for example, I got a document from Jacobson Associates in which they were discussing taking a subsaline, so-called subsaline, which as discussed in the literature, would be a nuclear-powered tunnel boring machine for use on the moon, but beneath the moon's surface. And they even quoted a dollar figure for transporting this machine to the moon to construct tunnels, subsurface tunnels on the moon. If that's been done, it has not been done with chemical rockets, perhaps with something else, like maybe these big black triangles with the glowing plasma lights on the underside that thousands of people have seen. A lot of people have seen these. Someone's flying them. My guess would be it's the American Industrial Military Complex. And if they do have a heavy lift capability to go to the lunar environment, you would need something like that to take a tunnel boring machine, because they are big, they are long, they are bulky, and they're very heavy, and you will not transport something like that to the moon with chemical rockets. You will not. And yet, I found that discussed in the underground tunneling literature back in the late 60s, early 70s, which is my way of saying, again, that you find these little hints. If you really burrow into the documentation, you really get deeply into the archives. They can't hide everything, and you get these little hints here and there to other programs and other agendas and other compartmentalized realities that are taking place. It's almost completely hidden, but not totally, because it's so massive you can't hide it all. But if you hide most of it, or almost all of the time, from almost everybody, then it's 99.9% hidden, and for most purposes, most of the time, from their standpoint, that's good enough. Now, if you are creating facilities on the moon and on Mars, and I saw references to mining the moon and asteroid mining, this is literature going back decades. I'm guessing there's probably a secret space program, or more than one. In fact, I've written about this in my blog, and others are also writing about that these days. I'm presuming that even more so, if you're sending a bunch of normal men away to live for extended periods on places like the moon and Mars, they won't want to go, and they won't want to stay there if there's no female companionship. Therefore, I'm presuming that we do have one or more parallel societies, not only on, under, and in this planet, but on other bodies in this solar system. In other words, Michael and Ira, I'm getting back around to a point I've made multiple times in this conversation. We are faced with a very peculiar situation on this planet. We are living under a fake, false, fraudulent reality facade. And I would mention in that regard, it is fake beyond belief. It is a fake engineered reality. One of the things that the shamanic plants early on revealed to me was just that. And when I saw it in all its malevolence, and it has a real hard demonic edge to it. When I was shown that, my response inwardly was, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Because it's, when you see it, it's breathtaking and stupendous in its malevolent grandeur. It is wicked. It is evil. Let's think back to what Donald Rumsfeld said in some public comments to the press just the day before the 9/11 attacks in 2001. He remarked that the Pentagon controllers, the Pentagon auditors, could not account for something like $2.3 trillion worth of military spending.
Yeah.
And the next day you had all of this mayhem in New York City and at the Pentagon. And I'm here to tell you that the federal government has an even bigger accounting problem now. There have been a number of researchers who've looked into this, and the sums of money that are being sucked out of this system right now through Wall Street, through government agencies, the City of London, the big banks, everywhere, are trillions of dollars. I saw a couple of interviews with Alan Grayson, the congressman from Florida, in which he was interrogating, questioning representatives of the Federal Reserve Bank before congressional hearings in recent years. Ben Bernanke was one, and also the Solicitor General for the United States Federal Reserve Bank, and they admitted that vast sums of money that have gone to the Federal Reserve cannot be really accounted for. That they couldn't give in congressional testimony an accounting for exactly where the money went, and exactly who had it, and exactly what was being done with it. They're printing it up, they're shipping it out by the trillions of dollars, so it's on their ledger in a sense, except they don't know where it is. They don't know what's being done with it. They don't know who has it. They don't really keep tabs on it. The point I'm making is it's all part of this false reality which is far above and beyond the wildest imaginings of the average human being on this planet. And it's taking place right in front of us, so to speak. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's visible and it's invisible, and it explains so much about what is so wrong with this planet, with what's going on with the human race. In that environment, you have something like fully half of humanity, 3.5 billion people, who are subsisting on something like $2.50 or $3 per day or less. I can't impress upon you, and these are hard statistics that are easily obtainable by anyone who does a simple word search on the internet. You can have data like that in less than a minute. Now, what is happening on this planet is evil and vicious beyond belief. A decision has been made at the highest, or should we say, the foulest levels of this parallel, whatever you want to call it, society, civilization, monstrosity, let's say. The decision has been made. We will rob the planet knowing that we are consigning billions of people to unimaginably grinding poverty and suffering so that we can feather our own nest. Is that not vicious?
That is absolutely vicious. And Richard,
and that is the way the system is set up. And what ayahuasca in particular showed me is that the control system extends. We see it all around in the physical realm, and I've just described some aspects of it. But it also extends into the near astral realm, what we would call the spiritual realm closest to the physical realm. We all go there in dreams, out-of-body experiences that people have when you have some kind of telepathic communication. Much of this takes place in the astral realm, and I was shown that this control system extends into the astral realm as well, and behind it is a massive, malevolent, cunning, insidiously Machiavellian, unimaginably intelligent, and very powerful intelligence that is not natural. I don't know who created it, or why, or when, or how, but it is here, it is on the scene, it is malevolent, and it does not mean us well. It is pulling strings behind the scenes, and I am now guessing that since it's not human, it did not directly, physically create the internet. But just as in the Alien movies, the Sigourney Weaver's alien spawns and creates other aliens. And I think in a like fashion, this intelligence is spawning a new order on this planet that's more to its liking. Robotic, automated, AI, less human, more inhuman, extremely inhumane. It is shaping the world and society to its bidding, to its will, and it uses anyone and anything who will assist it. Will you make nuclear missiles? It will see that you get money, you get status, you get a house, you get car. It rigs the banking system, the reward system. Are you a high-flying banker? Or maybe, a lot of them are flying these days right out of the 33rd floor of those high-rises. More and more of them are plunging out open windows. But are you a high-flying banker? You can rig those super-fast stock trading algorithms to create fraudulent money out of nothing, and that's what they're doing. It'll give you whores. It'll see you get cocaine. It'll see you get a Swiss chalet and maybe a nice getaway pad in the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands and all of that. And I'm describing real people who do real things, who have these little baubles and perks: women, drugs, money, cars, houses, numbered bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, etc. They're taken care of, and they do unspeakably evil, vicious, wicked, foul deeds in the service of this. I don't know what's happening on this planet, but you know the world is being killed right now, Michael and Ira. This planet is being killed.
It is being killed. And Richard, what I'd like to do is I'd like to stop right there. We'll pick it back up. We got one more break we've got to take, but let's get back to it with my guest and with Ira. And Ira, let me ask you right off the bat: do you have another question you want? And because we do have other callers who will be calling in as well. So just to let you both know, so we can move it along a little bit faster.
Sure thing, most definitely. The one thing that I would have him add in is his ideas as far as where do they get the money from to do these things, such as the fact that with their underground drilling and that sort of thing, they run across all of these massive amounts of resources that can be sold and so forth. Otherwise, just a wonderful conversation tonight, Richard. It's so good to hear your voice again, and thank you so much for being here.
Likewise, Ira, it's a pleasure to speak with you. As for generating the money, some of it a lot of it is printed up out of thin air. Quite a lot of it is stolen. Of course, there's massive narcotics trafficking. There's organ trafficking. There is also theft of gold. Evidently, vast quantities of gold have been stolen, among other places, from Fort Knox in the United States. And I'm also guessing, based on some of the things I've been told as I've gone along in my research, that in the process of making all of these underground tunnels and installations, including undersea facilities, if you run across a rich vein of gold or platinum, or you find a bunch of diamonds, or you run into a bunch of uranium ore, for example, all of those things can be sold on the black market for very large sums of money, and I presume that they are.
Okay, great. And next caller, we've got Rascala. And everybody else, just hang on the line and keep it silent on your end, and we'll get to you. Rascala, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Good evening, Richard.
Good evening.
I heard I've been listening to you for a little while, and I have mimicked much of what you said. I'm much in agreement with what you said. And I got on a little late, so you may have mentioned it earlier. So, in your opinion, let's put all the money and everything aside. Clearly, there is something very evil going on the planet. Something is fueling that. Would you agree?
I do.
And in your interpretation of what has happened, what do you believe is fueling that evil?
A hatred of biological life, a hatred of life with DNA, because the DNA is a hyperdimensional molecule. It has clearly a physical aspect, but it also has an aspect that anchors or ties in the biological organisms with other dimensions of reality, including higher spiritual dimensions of reality. In the case of the higher organisms, of divine or near divine levels of reality. And that is deeply threatening, in my perspective, to this very malevolent, very cunning, very devious and Machiavellian and very violent artificial entity that is lording it over this planet. Right now, it is doing a number on this planet, and that is the best answer I can give. It does not like biological life. In other words, because biological life is DNA-based, apparently on this planet and maybe on many others. And being DNA-based, it means it is natural, a natural life form that has a tie to the divinely creative order of the universe. And the machine doesn't just not like that. It despises that.
In your experience of life so far, have you found that there is an ability for consciousness, in other words, a mass consciousness, a society's consciousness, the world's consciousness, can actually create, can actually perform the act of creation through consciousness, through a general consciousness that
Yes.
can actually cause a creation of something?
Well, we all do that in our own way individually all the time. That's virtually the definition of life. By the mere fact that you're living, you're creating things. It's the nature of not only humans but of, I think, virtually all biological life to be creative. We mirror certain divinely creative aspects of the higher universal order. So absolutely. And can that be done on a group basis? Yes. Or even on a species basis? Yes, for good or for bad. Let me give you a brief example. When I was 3 years old, I was visited by an entity in Tidewater, Virginia, whom I called the Bone Lady. The Bone Lady gave me a deep, profound informational download, mind to mind, telepathically. And the gist of it is that terrible times were coming. She relayed that to me in 1958, that just a grim, terrible, foreboding time was coming. And sure enough, we can see it forming up right around us on the planet right now in all kinds of ways. And then the other thing that she showed me was that didn't necessarily have to happen. That while it would be awful beyond imagining, it didn't have to happen because humans, or at least a lot of them, have within them this creative, basically divine-like capacity to be Christ-like or Buddha-like, to be very elevated in consciousness, to be compassionate, to be creative and loving and very highly aware and awake. And that is our choice, man. We're at a cross in the road. She laid that out for me 57 years ago. But it's true. We as a species, as a planet, are at the point where if we go much further in a negative direction, we're through. You know, we cut down the planets, we radioactively contaminate the Pacific Ocean, we spray chemtrails, we biologically, genetically modify so many organisms, we chemically contaminate the whole planet from pole to pole and expect things to go well. They won't. We are on the brink of self-annihilation. And unless we, en masse, decide to choose door number 2 and go for this, the higher consciousness route, the route of creativity, consciousness, compassion, caretaking, being wise stewards of the planet, if we don't do that, Riskala, it's over. It's game over.
Richard, Michael didn't mention, but I do a show on Saturday night on the LNM network. And the last 20 or 30 or 40 words you just said are almost identical to what I have been saying. That the consciousness level of this planet has got to rise. If we're going to get anywhere, it's not going to be through more violence. It's going to be through revelation. We don't need any more revolutions. We need revelations in this world. People coming to the point of the understanding of recognizing that they themselves are allowing what is going on. We are the power. We've only had it, in many cases, stolen from us. They take it from us without our permission, but they take it with the understanding that, well, they didn't say we couldn't, so we're taking it. But once the masses have risen, that the consciousness level of this planet, where the masses rise to the next level, we will not need these people anymore. It will simply be, I've described this many times this way, it will simply be as when we were babies and had the pacifier in our mouth. We will not have any need for that pacifier any longer. We will just spit it out, and they will have to figure out what they're going to do with their lives, because we will be at a point where we're no longer deceived by this thing that we call the matrix, or this hologram that we all call life or society. All of the engineering that they've been doing will all crumble. All of that will come to a bottom end. This, what I'm sharing with you, I believe 100% makes them change their underwear, the very thought of it sometimes, because that's how scary it is to them.
There's nothing genuine about them. And this is, I would reiterate, one of the things that the shamanic plants showed to me, how fake, how false, how fraudulent this so-called reality that has been imposed on this planet is. There's nothing true or genuine or honest about it in any way. And you're right, we don't have 50 years to get it together. We don't have 30 or 20. We may not even have 10, maybe not even 5. We're at the point where a lot of us at the same time have to raise our consciousness a lot higher. And if we're not willing to do that, it means that we have given away our humanity and we've given away our planet.
Amen.
Richard, have you heard of the 2% theory?
The what theory?
2%, the 2% theory.
Well,
that it takes 2% of the population to begin a shift in the way things work.
Well, I don't know. I couldn't say. What I will say is that we don't have time to just, for 2% to just begin to think about starting to do something. We're way past that point. We, on a species basis, a planet-wide basis, need to take concerted action in our own best interest and in our planet's own best interest. And if we are not able or willing to do that, not 50 years from now, not 40 years from now, not 30 years from now, not 10 years from now, but now, then why are we here? Why are we even here? If we don't perceive that we have skin in the game of our own life, that we have skin in the life of our own home planet, then Riscala, why are we even here?
Well, I believe we're here to help each other. But however, having said that, I relate to what's happening on this planet very parallel to the first Matrix movie. People are in this thing. They don't even know they're in this thing. And that is all part of the deception that you're speaking of. I've said many times that there's places in the Bible that there's one place that says we're born into sin. I have come to the conclusion, my personal opinion, that sin that the Bible refers to is a system, is this corrupted system that has existed for a very long time. This has been going on for a very, very, very long time. This didn't occur 50 years, 100 years. This has been going on thousands of years. Yes. And it was supposed to be through a process of bringing in an individual to this planet that people call the Son of God, who was as close to a God as you could be in the physical flesh, able to have instant manifestations of his desires. So he was, in a way, he was God. He was God in the flesh. He was supposed to bring all of this to an end and begin the new way of thinking. My personal belief is his message was exactly, well, not exactly, but very parallel to what you and I and Michael are trying to do. There's a system here you're being lied to about everything. You have power. All you have to do is take it back. And they didn't like that.
Everything. I don't know, Michael, if you put up the photograph that I sent you with me in Native American ceremonial attire.
I sure did, and Riscala, thank you so much for your call.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Riscala. What I want to say about that, Michael, is I got together that attire for my nonviolent peace protest at a nuclear missile silo in North Dakota in 2010. The feathers and the crystals that I'm wearing reflect the fact that though I'm not Native American, I am a native to this planet. I was born on this planet. And what I am communicating is, in a sense, we all need to get back to nature, because the mass of human beings on this planet at this point have lost their natural connection with nature. And because we've lost that connection, we are not proper stewards of the planet or even of our own lives. And unless we reestablish that connection at a living, natural level with the planet itself, then how can we possibly participate or cooperate with the planet in the global healing process that must take place? And the answer is we can't. So what I'm communicating is not only that this nuclear technology is hideous and inhumane and destructive of life in every way on every level, but all the rest of it, the chemtrail spraying, the genetic modification, the toxic chemicals, on and on. We've got to resolve all of this, the trash in the seas, all the plastic garbage. And unless we reestablish this natural, vital tie with nature and with the planet, it's over. So that is a key process for us, Michael.
It absolutely is. And we have another call here. It is 602 area code. And again, folks, when you call in, I ask that you mute your end until I call you on, because if the guest is talking and I hear you, I have to let you go. So 602 area code, welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm sorry, I kind of joined the show a little late, but Richard, I've followed you for years. I've listened to your information, and I apologize if this question's already been asked. But, you know, watching what's happening on the planet right now, and I've been following this for a long, long time, the extremes that the planet is going through right now, let me ask you this. Do you think that this is being caused consciously by ourselves, and as the planet itself is going through, I guess, this shift, this frequency change, we are part of that causal effect? And secondly, if you do not believe that, then, you know, I do also follow the Planet X theory. I've looked into it and researched it deeply, and I've seen so much evidence that does point to this. And of course, with your research you did throughout the years on all the underground bases that have been done throughout not just the United States, but the entire planet, you think that this is what they've been preparing for, and basically with everything that's happening economically, they're imploding everything to basically bring together this, you know, catastrophic physical event on the planet with the economic event. They go into their, you know, little underground caverns there, and they're all going to die anyway, in my opinion, to come out as the rulers once again to keep this process of enslavement, you know, this prison planet, keep it going in the same process.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to all of the points that you've touched upon. All of that may be in play and more. As regards the interaction between the consciousness of humanity, or the unconsciousness of humanity, and the planet, yes, I believe there is a definite give and take dynamic there, and always has been, because the planet itself, the Earth, is a massively conscious and aware being, way beyond the level of awareness or ability to conceive of the average human being. But yes, the Earth itself is conscious. In the Vedic tradition, the presiding deity or demigod of the Earth is named Bhumi. And other traditions also have a conception of that. But yes, the Earth itself has a consciousness and awareness, and it is vast. And we do interact with that, most people not very consciously or very unconsciously, unfortunately. And so if the so-called dominant species on the planet is not in conscious harmony with the planet on which it resides, clearly that creates fundamental underlying issues, great fundamental underlying issues that we are grappling with now. And yes, to a great extent, those issues are of our device. This gets back to the point the Bone Lady made to me, that terrible things will happen, but they don't have to happen. It's a result of tremendous ignorance and malevolence. As for Planet X, I couldn't say specifically anything about Planet X in particular, but I would observe that the universe in general, the galaxy in particular, and even this solar system are full of myriad rogue space rocks of all sizes, from the size of a small meteor on up to planetoids and even rogue planets. And I understand there are even rogue burnt-out stars that are hurtling through the vastness of space. So from a statistical standpoint, it's only a question of time until one or more of those slam into the Earth. They have before. There are some impressively large impact craters on the Earth here and there all over the world. It's happened before and presumably will again. Whether or not something like that will occur in the relatively near term, I don't know. We'll find out if and when it happens. And as regards the rest of it, and upcoming events with these so-called elites, self-styled elites, going underground, and what is the purpose of them going underground? Yes, I think their motivation would be much along the lines that you sketch out, but the purpose for making the facilities, there are actually multiple purposes. So I think that multiple contingencies have been prepared for to a certain extent. They have their remote viewers, and their remote viewers present them with a variety of probable scenarios with error bars. But they're like everyone else. At the end of the day, they also have to wait and see what's going to happen. Yes, they have their plans. I agree that much of this economic collapse that is now begun could have been avoided, and it has been engineered at a certain level, massively so, for very devious, self-serving purposes that have brought tremendous hardship on billions of people. It's heartless. It's unconscionable. You could even say it's unpardonable. And yet, that's the situation. Their plan does appear to be to waste everyone else, or permit large numbers of people to be wasted, and then they will come out at the end of time and once again rule the roost on their terms. Well, my response to that is, we shall see what we shall see. It's not over till it's over.
Richard, I absolutely agree with that. I know that we are at least in my opinion, 10% of the population is at least aware of somewhat of what you just said, and of course what Michael's been talking about for years, and many other people. Again, each spark of light is lighting another candle, and I think the luminosity is growing, so to speak. So. Thank you for answering those questions for me, and great show, Michael. Richard, thank you again. Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you for listening and for following my writing over the years. I appreciate that. I want to reiterate, as I was mentioning before, there is a time element here. Time is tolling. We don't have indefinite large amounts of time to resolve these situations. Either we resolve these situations favorably on terms that are beneficial to us in our best interests, the best interests of all humanity and of the planet, or we don't. And if we don't, then the situation will be resolved for us and probably not in our favor or in the best interest of the planet. So we have a lot of incentive, powerful incentive, to bring things to a conclusion on favorable, creative, peaceful terms.
Well, once again, I absolutely agree with you. And I heard something very curious that I thought I would just bring up, that, as all books have a beginning and an end. And I think that the book that they have scripted out has been played out and now is coming to an end. And now our book and our first chapter is opening, and it's being written for us and not for the so-called elite. So I think we have a wonderful future. Yes, I do think we are going to go through some extremely difficult physical, mental, spiritual events in the very near future. My opinion, again, within the next year and a half, could be longer. But I see a very bright future for us if we only choose to go in that direction. And I'll listen to the rest of the show off the air. Thank you again, Richard, for all your work. And Michael, keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. The one rejoinder I would have to that, and many of your comments are very apropos, is that the time element is crucial, and also the fact that fully half of humanity and more subsist on mere dollars a day. When you subsist on that bare level of economic activity that is almost not there. A global financial crash means that if you only have $3 and you're reduced to 5 cents, you're dead. What are you going to buy?
Right, exactly.
And so this implies this global financial crash is just vicious beyond belief. I mentioned this earlier today to another person with whom I spoke, saying that this system, which has been set up, is far worse than the Nazi system, and everyone mentions the Nazis as the gold standard of vile systems. I'm telling you that this system that has been set up now, and which is being crashed, the crash is beginning as we speak, that it is far worse.
It is
than
because
the Nazi system.
Because I'll tell you this right now: the Nazis didn't have the technology and weaponry they have now. That's for sure. And another question from our chat room. I got a couple questions there. I'll get to quickly. One of our listeners asked if you had ever met Phil Schneider and what you might think of his claims.
Well, Phil Schneider, I did communicate with him by telephone before he died. Phil made certain very extravagant claims, and so I asked Phil to send me proof that he was who he said he was and had done the things that he said he had done. Phil said that he would send me a small box full of documentation of his claims and of his career. He never did. I spoke to him more than once, and then sometime after that he died. And I'll say this about Phil Schneider: the central part of his story, that there are these big underground bases. Yes, there are. That's true. As to whether Phil Schneider was personally involved, I can't say. He never presented me any documentation, or to anyone else that I know of. Now, he alleged that he was involved in a shootout, ray gun shootout, with purported extraterrestrial beings beneath, in a base beneath Dulce, New Mexico, or near Dulce, New Mexico, which is just south of the Colorado border. And as proof of that allegation, he showed some people that he had burns on his chest where he had allegedly been shot with an alien ray gun or a flash gun. And in response to that, I would simply say I've worked in industry. At one time, I had a job in a foundry. And I know that when you work in heavy industry, you can get injured. And one of the things that can happen is you can be burned. There are a lot of men who get burned working in industry or in the military, for example. And it doesn't mean that necessarily that they got shot by an alien ray gun. Some people also mutilate themselves to gain notoriety for whatever reason. Now, I don't know how Phil got the burns on his body, if indeed they were there. I never saw them myself, but other people allegedly have. So if he had burns on his body, I don't know how they got there. And if he did, the mere fact that there were burns on his body does not necessarily mean that he was shot by an alien ray gun. The third thing I would remark about Phil is that in his public statements, some of which have been widely circulated on the internet, he does refer to me as Richard Sauder, but my name is spelled incorrectly. It's spelled S-A-U-D-E-R. It is spelled in remarks attributed to him as S-O-U-D-E-R. He also alleges that I am a PhD architect. I am not. I do have a PhD in political science, but I have never worked in the architecture field. I have no academic or professional qualification in the architecture field. I never presented to Phil Schneider that I do. And the third thing is, he alleged that I had worked on these underground basis programs. That is also false. I have not. I have researched it. I've gone to the library in a major way. I've talked to people who have been involved in some of these underground programs and construction and bases, but I personally have not been in any of these compartmentalized programs. I've never had a security clearance. So, judging by the things that Phil Schneider said about me publicly, which are demonstrably false and easily proven to be false, not the least by me, I can only wonder about other aspects of what he said. Did he also exaggerate and point blank misrepresent other aspects of what he said? You can see where I would have questions.
Absolutely. And you know, I have nothing but respect for guests like yourself who will come out and say, hey, I can't prove that, so I can't say it's true. However, I will say this: we also have to respect the fact that we know how deep these alphabet agencies will go, and how when somebody maybe he was trying to get truth out, maybe them technologies we were talking about earlier, those mind control technologies to discredit him now, maybe those were used, maybe they, you know, so and maybe they make sure people are dead before they do get to send things they promised to send. I'm just saying, on you know, in the big picture.
Michael, I don't know.
Right.
I can't say more than I just said. I can't say.
Right.
I have questions about Phil Schneider. I do know that what he said about me, the things he said about me,
were not true.
Were demonstrably not true.
And I welcome that, because I question everything and everybody, and some of my listeners appreciate me for that, and other ones bang their head on the wall because of it. I want proof. But
let me finish this with
Sure.
this about Phil. The central part of what he was saying, that there are these underground bases, and a lot of them, yes, there are. As far as that goes, that's factually true.
I see. Okay, and let's go to our next question. Let's see here. We've got, I don't know. Oh, okay, here it is. If an asteroid or comet hits the Earth, wouldn't they be in trouble in those underground bases? Seems everything would be damaged or cave in. What do you think?
Well, you know, it all depends. If they were at the location where a big asteroid actually smacked into the Earth, I think they would be vaporized in about 1,000th of a second. However, if they were some distance away and in competent rock that was not fractured and faulted, you could actually be better off in a well-designed, well-built underground facility than on the top of the ground. So it's contextual, you see. And I think if you were also at the antipode of a major asteroid strike, in other words, directly on the opposite side of the planet from where the asteroid struck, there would be just a humongous shockwave that would be concentrated at that location. So, if they, perhaps through accurate remote viewing years in advance, were able to ascertain that indeed a big space rock is inbound, and just off the top of my head that it's going to hit, let's say, Indiana, well, they would say, well, we won't make our base, underground safety base in Indiana. They would do some research and figure out where to build it elsewhere that would be safer and also not at the antipode. But the thing is, the stream of future events is flexible and slippery. So anything they may do is a best guess based on the best data they have available to them at the time. And they are, in their arrogance, also prone to error.
Yeah.
Everything considered, I'll leave them to their own devices and take my chances where I am.
And I second that motion. I've had people through the years who have told me, Michael, save yourself now. They've got areas where they bought up or whatever, and they've got survival groups together. And if it was up to them, I would be in the middle of nowhere right now for the last 8 years. So for me, I feel like there is a God. And I feel like God will put me where I am supposed to be when this happens. Whatever it might be. If it's meant for me to perish, then perish I will. If it's meant for me to survive, then I will be put on that path to survive. And in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do what I do because this is what's most important to me, and this is what makes my life complete. So, let me ask you this, Richard. Well, let me give you the floor, Richard, because, wow, our time is flying. I want to give you the floor, and you've got about good 6-7 minutes if you want it to get out anything that you'd like. And I do want to say this: I have truly enjoyed speaking with you tonight, and you're welcome on Late Night in the Midlands anytime you like.
Thank you, Michael. You're welcome to have me back. I'd be delighted to continue our conversation in the future. I hope that we're able to do that. I do think that in this coming time, the financial turmoil has already begun. It's going to be severe. I think anyone who's been following the news the past week or so knows that Greece is now in the process of defaulting on its sovereign debt to the IMF and to the EU, and that's causing shockwaves and ripple effects in the financial markets globally. At the same time, the Ukraine is on the verge of also defaulting on its sovereign debt. At the same time, Puerto Rico just announced, the governor of Puerto Rico announced within the last day or two that Puerto Rico is also going to default on its bond obligations that it cannot pay. So this whole house of cards is now beginning to come down. It's beginning in the provinces in small poor countries like the Ukraine, Greece, and one of the provinces of the United States, Puerto Rico, an outlying insular possession in the Caribbean Sea. But all of this will be coming home to continental Europe and to Western Europe and to the United States with a lag time. And it will come home with a vengeance. When it does, it will rock the world, because still, not much longer, but still, the United States dollar is the most used currency on the planet and is a so-called global reserve currency. Not for much longer, but still it is. As it collapses, it's going to cause havoc in world markets, including in commodity markets, including in food production, food processing, food transport, and food sale, which means there will be hunger issues. For people with very little money, they will be able to purchase very little food. And if you now have $3 a day and spend almost all of that to buy some lentil beans and rice to feed your family, when it all collapses and you have nothing, oh, Michael, that's going to be a hard road. And I just described half of humanity. You know, it's hard to live on nothing. There are people living now on just $2 or $3 a day when they don't have, and I mean billions, Michael, billions. When they don't have even that $2 or $3, what happens? Well, they may just starve and die in very large numbers. It's heartless, this thing that has been set up. It's evil and vile beyond the power of words to describe. I wish it were not so. I hope that miraculously, somehow, something can happen so that these desperately dire events that have been set in motion will not follow through to their logical conclusion of unimaginable suffering for so many people. And yet, I can see the chain of events has begun, and I can see that barring some kind of angelic or divine intervention or instantaneous mass awakening of humanity, that we are now to the point where very, very bad things may happen in the coming weeks and months. Michael, I wish it were not so, and yet, I'm speaking to you as a man with multiple graduate degrees from multiple large universities. I've traveled the world. I speak multiple languages, and I read widely. I talk to a lot of people, and my considered conclusion at this point is we are in deep trouble. We are deep in the weeds, and I don't see how we get out of it without terrible events transpiring. I hope that nuclear war can be avoided, but you know, the power structure in the United States is very heavily nuclear armed. Yeah. Their power base depends on the global acceptance of the American dollar, which is now dying. As of this weekend, it's getting weaker and weaker all the time. The danger is that the American power structure, this 1% or fraction of 1%, will endeavor to maintain their predominant global position by military force. And being that the American army can't even conquer Afghanistan in the field, if they set out to maintain their position of global primacy by military means, it will not be via a World War I or World War II infantry-style war. They will go to nukes to try to do that. And if they do, it will be a very bad hair day for the human race and the planet.
To say the least, it certainly will. Well, Richard, I really mean it when I say you are amongst my favorite guests now, and I would love to have you back for updates as we go through this thing we called life, and I thank you so much for joining us here tonight. This show will rerun on the L&M Radio Network in the morning. It'll also be on the Dark Matter Radio Network as well, and several other AM and FM stations such as K98 Talk and High Point Radio, the top of New Jersey, and they actually cover 3 states on FM and AM. So thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this, and you're very brave to come out and talk about these things. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me on. And if people want to check out my blog, it's eventhorizon.blogspot.com. That's eventhorizon.blogspot.com. And they can click on my book covers right there on my blog and go through to the order page.
All right, sounds good, my friend. And when this show is up tomorrow, I'll send you a link to it. And you're welcome to put it up on your website if you like, or whatever you want to do with it, just so you have it.
I appreciate it, Michael. Have a good evening.
All right, you too, my friend. Good night now.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, there you have it. Richard Sonder